Hey, welcome back, everybody, you decent people, and Happy New Year. I think I already wished you all a Happy New Year, but just in case I haven't, I'm pretty sure that I did in the last episode. Cons- Anyway, there's no reason to debate that. It's funny before I get into it, and I hope you all are having a Happy New Year, but it's funny, I was listening back to the last episode, and man, as dry as I might seem sometimes when I'm recording these things, it sounded like I was extra dry on that, like I was going through something, but I promise you that I wasn't. I guess it was just, I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it. And with that said, if you listened to it and you didn't hear anything that was different and you thought it just sounded fine to you, then never mind. Just ignore everything that I just said. And let's just get into today's episode then. A couple of episodes ago, though, check it. I talked about how dating at this age, it should be simpler, but also how it provides its own complications. And sometimes I feel like that's the theme of this podcast, just about how dating at this age should be simpler, but how it's not simpler. But with all of that said, yeah, I mentioned that yet again for like however many times. A couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, and one of the reasons for that was because the older you get, the more that your lists change. And for people that aren't familiar, or for people that are new to this podcast, you know that myself and Reginald, we did a whole episode on the list. And it was an episode that was funny to me because Reggie's list was 3 pages long, yet he still criticizes me for being too particular. But that's Reggie being Reggie. But with all of that said, me and Reggie, we were actually having a conversation about that episode. And yes, just so you know, I am referring to that Reggie. But this particular episode is about more about how and why that list that we all have, how and why it evolves as we get older, and as you get older, and particularly when you're still single. Because if you're married, I don't know if you should have a list, or maybe you'll just keep the list around to hold the person to that list. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's just a cruel thing to hold over somebody's head and just be like, hey, you promised me you would be this and you would be that, but you failed on number 26 on the list or whatever. I I don't really know. But with all of that said, hey, there's a fine line between taking too much off your list as you get older, which would be settling, and holding someone firm, with the same list that you hadn't altered in 20 years. And if you had the same list that you've had for 20 years and it hadn't changed, that could mean that you're too rigid. So in one sense, you could be settling by taking too much off. And in another way, you can be too rigid by keeping the list the same, or adding more to it as you, specifically as you get older. Because shoot, if you're at this age of your life and your list is still the same and you're still out here in these streets single, then yeah, it's probably safe to say that you're a little bit too rigid in that. You might need to adjust that. And it also makes me think of something that me and Reggie, yeah, again, that Reggie talked about on this podcast before. Reggie has said repeatedly that his big concern was that someone would like him more for what he brought to the table than they actually liked the person that he was. And to me, that sounds like the thing that someone would do when they're having some kind of list conflict. And that's pretty much what the gist of this episode is. It's about list conflict. Either they've removed too much from their list, or they reshuffle the order and priority of the list. Because when you think about it, who has, like, quote unquote, like the person on their list, which should be a pretty important thing that you would look for when you're looking to be in a relationship and marry someone, because people don't get married necessarily. It's just one of those things that should be a given. But as you get older, and for lack of a better word, more desperate, you can start to look past some of those things that you might not have in the past. Like actually liking the person that you're in a relationship with, or God forbid, marrying, like I just said. like you like the qualities of a person without actually liking the person. And many can point to someone in their past, hopefully not in their present, that they've probably been on dates with where they've said, he or she, they're nice, they're cool, but there's just something about them that doesn't do it for me. Or some version of that. Back in the day, it was about, I like the person, but they're a nice guy, or something like that, where it's like you don't necessarily want to put your finger on what it is, but you wanted a bad boy or something like that. Or the guys like that wanted an around the way girl. And then it's like you realize that, yeah, they're too nice or whatever, or they're too soft or whatever. So, but they have all of these other qualities that you do like, and instead you try to like convince yourself that, you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Reggie would probably say it has something to do with chemistry or the lack thereof. And of course, I think that's BS, but I continually lose arguments about the idea of chemistry. People just continuously want to fight me on the idea of chemistry, something I don't believe in, but they don't come with any concrete evidence or proof or about the existence of chemistry. But yet and still, for some reason, I come out of the argument the loser because I want something tangible that you can put your finger on that points to the reason that you might like somebody. Yeah, I'm the crazy one. Anyway, but the point is that people, as they get older and again more desperate, they can look past certain things on their list, or things like liking someone that's not on their list but should be a given, and they can ignore some of the things, yeah, that should be obvious. And I know that no one likes the word desperate, so I don't want to dwell on that. I'm sorry if you get in your feelings if I refer to you as desperate, or if you think that this hits you in a way that I'm talking to you. But I guess they say a hit dog will holler. And I guess that's contradictory of me, because I just apologized and then doubled down on the fact that I shouldn't apologize. So I'm sorry about that. There I am again apologizing, but not really knowing what I'm apologizing about. Anyway, people act as though if they admit to being desperate, they'll turn into a pumpkin or something. There's no shame in it. And especially since your actions will say it. I mean, let's be real about this. If you are a desperate person, people will see the desperation. People will smell the desperation. And that's partially why you get in these bad relationships with these leeches and predators, because they can see and smell the desperation on you. So you're saying that you're not desperate, while I believe in speaking things to power and speaking things into existence. Yeah, you're giving off the vibe of desperation. Sorry to be the one to break it to you. So you may as well admit that you're desperate and then take steps to deal with it. And being with somebody that you don't like because they have money or because they're nice, it comes across as a little desperate. As a matter of fact, if you're with someone that you need to give yourself a pep talk to be with, then that's bad. It's one thing. It's one thing if you have to give yourself pep talks to jump into the dating pool in general. That's a whole different thing, and that's somewhat understandable. But again, if you need to do that to date a specific person, you need to evaluate your desperation level. Again, no shame. Like I always say, this is the no judgment zone. Yeah. Or you might need to evaluate your loneliness level. And there is a direct correlation between those two things. So while you're evaluating one, you may as well throw the other one in, because loneliness can oftentimes lead to desperation. Me and Reggie had a conversation about that in the episode of one of these podcasts, about the connection between loneliness and desperation. Loneliness will cause you to do some things that you wouldn't normally do if you were in your right mind. It will cause you to do some desperate things. So it is what it is. And I understand that in the same way that no one likes to admit being desperate, no one likes to admit to being lonely. Those things are like the third rails of admissions. Nobody wants to do it, even though once again, your actions might scream it. You might scream loneliness. You might scream desperation without even saying it. And back to Reggie's concerns. Women and men as well can date someone that has a decent job, maybe making decent money, has decent credit, has their own house, their own car, blah, 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 all of that stuff. For all intents and purposes, the person is marriage material. Never mind that you may not be physically attracted to them or that you might not have much in common with them. As a person gets older, they have to ask themselves, is what they're giving up worth what they're getting from that person? You get stability, you get security in some sense, which is a big deal for anyone in a relationship, but it can also be at the expense of love. So it means that that's something, again, that you have to evaluate. And at this age, that age being the demographic of this podcast, you have to wonder, if you let that person go, how many more people are you going to come across in your life with those positives? So I definitely understand the internal conflict that goes on when you meet somebody and they have a lot of these good qualities, but you're not necessarily feeling them. Yeah. You'd also have to wonder if you can make yourself fall in love with that person despite the things that they lack. And not only can you fall in love with that person, but can you sustain that love for years, if not decades, until one of you or both of you die? I guess the positive in that is that since the demo of this particular podcast, Cater, is older, it won't be for that many years and or decades that you will have to sustain it. So hey, a shorter shelf life. Who knows? Maybe you can make it for years. Definitely fewer years than when you were 20, because if you're with somebody that you don't like, they'll probably like push you into the grave anyway, one way or another. Mm. And another thing I think about is, while you're trying to figure out if you can love that person that has the great stats, but you're not feeling, what do you owe them in terms of transparency while you're going through this figuring out process? Because usually that person that you're trying to convince yourself to like is already into you more than you're into them. That's usually the way that these things work. Are you obligated to tell them that you're not feeling them like that? It seems harsh to tell them, but it seems harsher to string them along while you conduct your own private tug of war. But if you're open about it and tell them, they might leave. Hmm. Yeah. They might leave while you're still in the process of convincing yourself. It seems like they'll be hurt regardless of the decision. And that's because, goes back to what I said earlier, this isn't sustainable. Not in this modern marriage dating era. Back in the days when people got married and it was a crime to get divorced, essentially, then you could get away with that. Or back in the day when there were, or in countries or whatever, when people had arranged marriages and therefore just couldn't leave. So you had to make things work. Yeah, of course it's sustainable because you literally have a, what do they used to call those things? Oh, a ball and chain. It just popped in my head, because you literally have a ball and chain attached to your ankle and you can't remove it. So yeah, of course it makes it seem like it's sustainable, but you're not happy. Doesn't this loveless marriage where you just go through these routines day after day? Never mind. Never mind. You get the point. So it's all about making the choice that'll cause the least amount of pain. At least it is to me, if you actually care about the humanity, care about that person in any kind of way, if you are a nice or kind person. I mean, I would think that you would want to make the choice that causes the least amount of pain for you and for them, especially for them, considering that you've already gotten them invested. So telling them that you're having this internal conflict will obviously cause the least amount of pain, even though you might be the one in pain, because they'll choose to leave before you go through the process and convince yourself. Anybody with any sense of pride, I can't imagine a woman coming and telling me, yo, I just want to be upfront with you. I'm having this problem, this likability problem with you, and I don't know if I can get over that mess. I really love who you are. You're a great guy, but I'm just not feeling you like that. Kind of like that New Edition song, Sorry, but you're not my kind of girl. It's not your look. You're very pretty. It's not your style. It's not the way that you dress, yet way that you comb your hair, fix your hair, whatever. It's that same thing. So in the same way that Ralph in the song was singing that, hey, sorry, you just not my type. You owe it to you to that person to be as transparent as possible and let them know. Understanding also, again, that the consequences are that they'll be like, well, fuck you then. That's probably how I would handle it. I probably wouldn't say fuck you because, yeah, those days of me cursing people out and stuff like that, I hope they're gone and long past me. But I would gracefully bow out because I have some pride about myself. And for anyone who would just say, okay, and just stick around while the person makes the final decision, that means that that's something in your self-esteem or whatever that you might need to evaluate. But for the person that has to tell the person or the person that's having that tug of war, I think it's fair. And let me also say that, to be fair, when you meet somebody and you're going through the dating process, most likely you're not going to like somebody at the same level at the same time. That is completely different, where it's like, okay, he or she is feeling me. I'm just a little bit slower to warm up, but I like the way that this is going thus far. That's completely different from someone saying, yeah, I think I've seen enough about this person to know that this won't work, but I like enough about him to try to stay with him because he has so much more going on for him or her that than anyone else that I've encountered. So I'll stick around just for that, despite the misgivings that I have. So see, two completely different things. Yeah. So that's one. The what causes the least amount of pain is you're telling them up front, hey, I'm going through this process. I don't think I'm feeling you like that. Here's the new edition song. Listen to it and you'll understand what I mean. That's the first way. But the downside for you personally is that that'll cause you the most amount of pain, probably, because you might realize that, hey, shoot, I should have given them more of a shot because those things, yeah. And I see other things. Now I want that person back. And now they've moved on. So you might experience the most amount of pain, but it'll cause them the least amount of pain. The second least amount of pain, or second largest amount of pain, depending on how you want to look at it, is stringing them along while you figure out what you're doing and if you really like them or if you can like them. Because shoot, that process can take a long time for you to convince yourself and figure it out. And the more time that you spend with them and the more time that passes, the more likely that they'll grow more and more invested in you. So while you're waffling along trying to convince yourself, they're like all in love and stuff. And then you'll have to come back to them one day and be like, yeah, I made the decision. I'm not feeling you. And then their soul will be crushed. Then if you get married and realize that they aren't the person and you can't do it anymore, that's the third and the largest. That's the category that would cause the largest amount of pain, is once you get married. Then you both will be crushed because, one, you invested time, you actually convinced yourself to actually like take a vow under God, and a vow of whatever people vow when they get married. I don't know. But you would have done that. So if you actually have to go through the divorce process, that can't feel good even for you, even though you're the reason that the marriage is ended. So just to recap the three categories. One, while you're going through the process in dating, if you tell them, yo, I'm not feeling you like that. I don't know if I can feel you like that, but I'll try. That will cause them the least amount of pain. It will cause them pain, but it might cause you the most amount of pain because they might go off after you dump them and find something, I wouldn't say better, but something better for them. And then you'll realize, oh, shoot, I should have given them a shot. Then you'll be hurt. Then the second category is if you string them along while you're trying to figure it out, then you come to the conclusion that, yo, nah, this isn't going to work. You let them down. then they'll be crushed. That'll cause them a larger amount of pain than the first category, but it won't cause you as much pain because, hey, you would have gotten the experience of knowing that even if they do go off and find somebody better or somebody better for them, you don't care because regardless, it doesn't work for you. And then the third category that causes the most pain for everyone, um, even though I think I might have said the first category might cause the most pain for the person that's dumping the person, but the marriage category, the third category, would cause the largest amount of pain probably for both people involved, because you've entered into a relationship at the highest level and you decide that, nah, it won't work. So with all of that said, you decide. Either way, you should probably decide to dive into the desperation slash loneliness slash whatever that has you with someone that you don't like. And to those that go into relationships wondering why the person wants to be with you, and if that person really likes you, if you're wondering those things, I don't know how you deal with that one. I guess you could quit your job and see how he or she takes it. Nah, don't do that. And if you do that, don't blame this podcast for that stupid shit that you decide to do or that I just told you to do. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Here's a good one. Tell the person that you've come down with some kind of deadly disease and see if they'll stay. Nah, you don't want to do that one either. I believe in the power of words. And like I said, speaking words to power, like I said earlier. And you don't want to speak that stuff into existence. You don't want to like use sickness as a way to try to figure out if somebody likes you and then you wind up sick. Ooh, that would kind of suck. That wouldn't kind of suck. That would really suck. Ooh, I got one. All right, check it. If you're a guy, this only works for the fellas. Sorry, ladies. If you're a guy, tell her your dick doesn't work anymore and see if she stays. or or maybe, or maybe you should just think less about all of that and focus on getting your needs met. That's the real way to go. Because I would imagine that if he or she is doing everything that you want them to do in the relationship for you, I'd imagine that the questions about if they're there for the right reasons would disappear. Conversely, if you're getting everything you want in that relationship and you still have questions, then we might need to talk about your self-esteem. You could be right. Don't get me wrong. You could be right. Maybe she is with you for other things. But if you're getting all of your needs met, then that shouldn't be your focus or even on your mind at all for that matter. And to those that are trying to convince themselves to be with someone that they don't like, you got to be quick about that when you make your decisions. Ladies, if that dude has a pot belly or bad teeth, because I hear a lot about that from women at this age. I don't know what's up with the fellas and teeth. The pot bellies are easier to understand. The teeth thing I don't get, but there are a couple of people that I'm thinking of, and I won't mention any names, but they have participated in our Ask a Woman episodes. So I'll just leave that at that. You can go through the episodes and guess which ones I'm referring to, but it's more than one, trust me. But I don't know what it is. But ladies, you can talk to him about going to the gym or to a dentist. And if he doesn't or won't, then there's your answer. You just have to like figure out ways to make these decisions as to whether you can be with this person quicker, as opposed to like letting it linger into a marriage before you decide, yeah, 5 years ago, yeah, I should have like made a different decision. Yeah, you just want to avoid that just to protect everyone's feelings and stuff like that. I just don't like hurting people. So you need to figure out ways to get to the answers that you need quicker, as opposed to like going down the road for months and years and getting into marriages and stuff like that and leaving the person broken and battered. And then they'll be back in the pool and I'll date them. And if it's a woman, I'll date them and they'll carry that bitterness into the relationship with me. Or maybe I won't because I would have found my soulmate. Maybe I found my soulmate now. Who knows? but get the answers as quickly as possible. Guys, if you're with that woman and she's fine, but doesn't contribute anything to the relationship except for her fineness, why don't you demand that she cooks for you if you're into cooking? I can already tell you, fellas, good luck with that. Good luck. I'm joking. But the bottom line in all of this is that we all know that we shouldn't be entertaining people that we don't have genuine like for, or that we feel that we can't build genuine like for. Come on now. We too old. We know better. So we need to stop doing that. That's some 20-year-old, 30-year-old shit. And goes back to the point that unfortunately, a lot of the things that, speaking for myself, I experienced in dating when I was in my 20s and 30s, I still keep coming across even at this age. It boggles my mind. No, of course, all of this applies if you're looking for a serious relationship or something real with that person. If you're just looking to kick it with them, who cares? But as we get older, we need to cut some stuff from our lists. But some things should never leave. And that includes the obvious things that might not be on the list, like liking the person. Like the person. That is my lecture for the day. And that is all that I have to say about that. I want to close by talking about two people that died. I don't have anybody to talk about today that has been divorced. So I'll set the divorce thing to the side, and hopefully I won't ever talk about these 20-year couples being divorced. But come on now, this is life. I'll have another couple in a minute. But two people that died today. Well, not died today, but died over the last couple of weeks. One is Max Julien. Max Julien, I bring him up because for all of the Black people listening that fit into the demographic of this particular podcast, you should know about the classic film called The Mac. And for all of you that aren't Black or that haven't seen it, or from people from different countries, still boggles my mind that people from different countries actually listen to this mess. But for people that aren't familiar with the Mac, and for all of you African Americans out there that aren't at least familiar with the movie The Mac, you should be damned ashamed of yourself. Even if you haven't seen it, even if you haven't seen it in a while and don't remember the plot, you should still have some familiarity with that movie. You should go to your parents and slap them for not making you watch the movie, even though that might be kind of strange if your parents made you watch The Mac. Hard to say, because I can't remember how or why I saw it. I don't know. I just went through this phase in life when I was just really into blaxploitation films. And I won't get into the details about The Mac. You can glean from the title what The Mac was about. But it was out in 1973. And even though that was before my time, still, it's a classic. That's like people today will always say, well, that was before my time, as if nothing existed before they were born. Like like everybody's heard of the Temptations, for example. That was before my time, but it's like nobody says, hey, that Temptation song, I don't mess with the Temptations or Earth, Wind, and Fire because that was before my time. Nah, there are things that happened before your time that still you should be aware of. Now, putting the Mac in that category, I'm sorry, putting putting the Mac in the Mac in that category. Okay. Putting the Mac in that cat, putting the Mac in that category might be a little extreme, even though I say everybody should be familiar with it. I mean, in the grand scheme of the history of the world, I mean, that might be a little extreme, but I still hold tight on a lesser level. People should be at least familiar with the blaxploitation flicks. And they do have, seriously, they do have historical value because part of the reason that those films were made, because obviously white Hollywood wouldn't give Black filmmakers a chance. And then, unfortunately, in some cases, white filmmakers tried to exploit Black people. And that's why the term Black exploitation, that's where it really comes from, because in a lot of these cases, white filmmakers were trying to exploit Black life. And as such, because a white person doesn't know much or anything about Black life, especially Black back then. I mean, now things are a little bit better, but not where they should be. But back then, they knew very little about Black life. So they would cater to stereotypes. And thus, some of these movies were born, which is unfortunate. And it kind of contradicts my saying that everybody should be familiar with it, especially if this is another story of some white man or a group of white men taking advantage of Black culture, or even if it's perceived Black culture. Still, still, back then, though, it was all Black people had in terms of what they would go and see. So they would still go see these movies, and these movies became cult classics, even in our communities, even though they didn't they didn't have the most positive representation of Black people in general. It's funny how I couldn't even get a word out 2 minutes ago because I was laughing so hard at the idea of Black exploitation flicks. And then when I went into the details of it, how serious things got. So anyway, the point in all of that is Max Julien, sheesh, boy, I went down a rabbit hole, but that was a necessary rabbit hole considering the topic. Max Julien, who was the star of the movie The Mac, he died. He was 88 years old. And I just want to send a shout out to him and his memory. Hey, I don't know anything else that he was in, but now I'd be interested in finding out, because I would seriously doubt that he had a IMDb page. But there's only one way to find out, because I am not personally familiar of anything else that he was in. And yes, he does have an IMDb page. And actually, he was acting up until 2005. He was actually in How to Be a Player, the Bill Bellamy flick. Okay. And even leading up to the Mac, he was in several things, including he had a role on CBS Playhouse. He was actually on the Mod Squad. He was on an episode of that. And if you all don't know any of those movies, you should be ashamed of yourself. But, or any of those things that I reference, you should be ashamed of yourself. Learn your history, people. But yeah, so he was in The Short with Cat Williams in 2004. Yeah, so he was doing stuff. He was on that show One on One in 2005. That show with Flex Alexander, who's married to Shanice, and his daughter. I don't know who played his daughter, but who cares? So yeah, he was doing his business. So shout out to the Mac. Shout out to Max Julien's memory. God bless. God bless. Hope he made his peace. And then the next one that I want to bring up is the more obvious one, and that's Sidney Poitier, who died very recently, depending on when you listen to this episode of the podcast. And part of the reason that I bring Sidney Poitier up, and I don't need to get into his background in history. Everybody should know what his background in history is. And if you don't, shame on you. And I say that not in the way that you should know Black exploitation films. You should really know Sidney Poitier, because he was a pioneer as an actor, as a role model, as an activist, all of that stuff. But the reason that he has relevance to this show in particular is because Reggie does not watch movies. Yes, that Reggie. So if you are a longtime listener to this podcast, you've often heard me make jokes about Reggie not watching movies, even to the point that when I mention a movie or make reference to a movie, I go into this fake explanation of what movies actually are, because it's just a play on the fact that Reggie never watches movies. So I'm just like, you don't even know what a movie is. So let me explain to you what a movie is. And I often continue that joke by saying that the last movie that Reggie saw was Uptown Saturday Night. which was in that blaxploitation vein, which was a movie that came out in the 70s. And again, going back to Sidney Poitier's relevance to this show, Sidney Poitier was one of the stars of Uptown Saturday Night. So the movie example that I've been teasing Reggie about for years, that was the last movie that he saw, even though I don't think he saw it either. Still, Sidney Poitier, the star, one of the stars of that movie, has passed. So shout out to him, shout out to his memory, and to both these cats. I think Sidney lived well until his 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And with Max being 88, I mean, shout out to their memories. But I mean, I'm not shedding a tear over anybody who's lived 88 years plus. You've lived, you've had your life, and if you really do believe in God and heaven, shoot, I know personally, I don't think I want to live to be 88 years old. I just see myself just shuffling around in pain constantly. Nah, fuck that. I'll pass on that, even though I do know people that want to live to be 200. And shout out to them. That's just not me. But shout out to those two, Max Julien and Sidney Poitier. Shout out to their families and all of that stuff that you say when people die. And that is it for me on that note. Hopefully everybody lives the dream. Hopefully everybody has a good new year. Like I said in the past episode, I hope you get everything that you want in this year. And if you don't blame me. And again, like I said earlier, if you do those things in your relationship, like quit your job to try to like make your woman, to try to test your woman or your man to see if they really want to be with you, if they really like you, you can't blame me for that. I'm taking no blame in 2022. Reggie, come and say goodbye to the people. Reggie doesn't say anything. Reggie, come talk to the people. He's not saying anything, so I'll just say it for him. Goodbye, everybody.